This podcast was brought to you by Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. Bankrupting dentists and judging children is just the start. It's like if Cadbury eggs were created by George Orwell.
Hello, and welcome to Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review and discussion show with me, the Jonin Monkey.
And me, Sven the Crusader. If we were talking about wrestling this episode, you would all know why.
Well, in fairness, a lot is happening with wrestling. The Ultimate Deletion, Daniel Bryan coming back, and of course, WrestleMania. April is a busy month for wrestling, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, is it just me, or has the last 6 months just been one long stretch of returns? Like, we got Paige, as unfortunately as that ended. We're likely getting Undertaker as Biker Taker, which is hilarious to me. And we entered the alternate universe where Daniel Bryan is competing again. What is happening?
I know, right? It's crazy. And for anyone who's not interested in wrestling, well, I suppose Easter happened this month. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, you can tell how little I pay to the specific faith-based holidays because I totally missed it. Didn't even get candy.
Aw.
But then again, I wouldn't want to run the risk of eating one of George Orwell's Cadbury eggs.
Oh, God. Have some respect for the dead. Mind you, he didn't have much respect for anyone else. But anyway.
Least of all authority, and I mean, I can admire him for that. But anyway, on with the show.
As always, we begin with our first section, which is
Q&A.
This is the section where we answer questions from the audience. If you'd like us to answer your questions, either leave them in the comments or send them to me via Twitter with the hashtag MBQuestion.
Okay, our first question comes from McDuck.
Now that Nintendo is going to sell cardboard to us, I would like to ask, if you had the power to make decisions at Nintendo, what crazy product would you create?
If I had complete creative control with Nintendo and all their subsidiaries, you know what I would create? I would create Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, except good.
I know the temptation is to talk about games, but I think in light of Nintendo Labo, which for the record I actually think is incredibly charming and is probably be a good tool for kids to learn engineering and also to not spend all their time on their smartphones. But in terms of creating peripherals and accessories, well, the first thing that comes to mind is a power glove that actually works.
Yeah, that's a thought.
I mean, just putting Fire Emblem as an example, wouldn't it be cool if you had the power glove and you could just, like, move the units around with gestures?
Oh, man. Like Caesar on the battlefield.
The other geek in me is thinking that if you had, like, 2 of the power gloves and you would take a random example, Street Fighter, then I would love it if the control for that was doing the exact hand motions of a Hadouken.
I was about to say. To be fair, probably even I would enjoy that, even though I would almost certainly get my ass reamed because I suck at fighting games.
Although, that said, there would only be certain moves it would work with, like Shoryuken and Hadouken, most certainly. Chun-Li's spinning bird kick might be a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. You might actually need button inputs for that.
Part of me would also like that to be added to a Fist of the North Star game, because I know the guys behind Yakuza are developing one.
Oh my god, are they?
Yeah.
Presenting the all-new wonder.
Although, I'd love it if, in the spirit of Fist of the North Star, you have to be unbelievably specific with the pressure points, otherwise...
Oh god.
Otherwise...
That'd be one way to build hand-eye coordination.
True. Although, it would be pretty demoralizing if you go, "You're already dead." Wait. No, you're still alive. Let me try this again. Hang on.
Let me have another go at this.
I was going to try and think of a serious answer, but yeah, working power glove. That's the best way I can think of.
Yeah, and honestly, as much as they're given crap, I don't have too many problems with Nintendo's platforms and crazy ideas, so really there's nothing I could think to improve on or change too much. And plus, your answer pretty much just appeals to all of my sensibilities for Rule of Cool.
I mean, the only other things I can think of would be maybe an improvement on the Virtual Boy, but that would be getting too close into VR, or the Nerve Gears from Sword Art Online.
Yeah.
Or I suppose Rob, so that he would be relevant again, but I suppose he'd have to upgrade the AI, and I could even get annoying, or, well, even assuming that the Doomsday scenario doesn't happen and robots don't try to take over the world, it might be annoying just having Rob there as a backseat gamer the whole time.
Oh, God. Yeah, I'm just imagining the possible scenarios for that. Like, the A button is over there, idiot.
You know that character's low tier, right?
Oh, God. Backseat AI tier lister. My worst nightmare. Presenting Nintendo's all-new wonder, kill me.
You sure you want to go into ranked mode? You haven't won a single match online yet.
Oh, God, just Rob judging my multiplayer skills.
Oh, God, it would be like a less dangerous version of GLaDOS.
Okay, that is an obscurely horrifying thought right there.
How does it feel to be the savior of the world who dies before he can save the world?
Basically what we're getting at here is, you could do that whole idea, but you don't want to make people feel like they've been robbed. Hey!
That was a god-awful pun, Sven.
Yes, it was, Rob. Thank you.
Moving swiftly on. Although I have a horrible feeling that Rob's now going to be a recurring character.
Probably. He can join the illustrious likes of Chunin and Richard.
Our next question comes from Vice of Legend, and he asks,
do you think that people describe things as edgy too much? I say yes, as I feel like any time a game, movie, or anything else tries something in a serious way, it's instantly considered edgy.
No, and I'll tell you why I don't think that. Because a lot of the times it's accurate. Now, I don't agree with calling everything remotely serious edgy, but you have to understand, edge is a very, very specific, quantifiable concept. We're talking about, like, The Punisher, Christopher Nolan, all of Christopher Nolan. Judge Dredd is edge, Warhammer 40k is so edge it hurts me.
Yeah, it's not the fact that it's serious, it's something trying way too hard to be serious, or at the very least, trying way too hard to
be dark.
Yeah, that's a better way of describing it. It's that we're trying too hard and drawing attention to itself, like, look at me, look at how badass I am. Like, Infinite from Sonic Forces, I would describe as that, like, oh god, everything from the dark appearance to his theme music, which is just like this bad grunge trancing going.
I'm the tallest of mountains, I am the roughest of waves. I'm the toughest of terrors, I am the darkest of days. You're messing with me, I am a dangerous weapon. I am the sharpest of blades, I'll cut you down in a second. Cause I was born in this pain, it only hurts if you let it. So if you think you can take me, then you should go and forget it.
Yeah, it's like, for wrestling fans, compare, if you will, a monster heel like Braun Strowman, who is very legitimate, very serious. You can take him seriously as a presence even in the fake world of wrestling. Compare him to Baron Corbin.
That's exactly it. Like Braun Strowman, he just has like this natural posture. You look at him, it's this serious force, it's this hulking giant, and you're just like, oh crap, he's gonna wreck us. Baron Corbin, he tries to call himself the Lone Wolf, and
I mean, just listen to his theme song.
Not to mention that his finishing move is called The End of Days.
Yeah, and I mean, also look at his getup. tattoos, long black hair, black biker vest, and combat boots.
Yeah, you can have totally serious, but it's when you're trying that little bit too hard to be dark and trying to make yourself out like this complete and utter badass. Like, there are so many villains, especially ones aimed at young adults, that fall into that so badly. I mean, as much as I like Shadow...
Sasuke Uchiha.
Sasuke is a good one. Unfortunately, when he gets picked up by bad writers, Shadow has fallen into that category. In fact, this could be a complete BS, but apparently Kirk Thornton has essentially been directed to be the edgelord for Shadow these days.
Oh god, why? Kirk, you deserve better.
Now, I will grant you that it's possible people have been overusing the term, but the thing is that it always happens on the internet. I've lost count of so many terms like Deus Ex Machina that have been overused to the point of ridiculousness and more often than not used incorrectly. But edgy hasn't quite reached that point yet, and honestly, even if it had, it's one of the less harmful terms that's being continuously used. For example, Mary Sue, I'm actually really getting sick of, especially when it's always used on a female character that people feel hasn't earned the right to be powerful. Like, it's used on Rey, it's used on Khalifa, Dragon Ball Super. It's a way for them to try and cover up their issues and look smart by saying, oh, it's not because I have a problem with powerful women, it's because it's a Mary Sue, you know.
Yeah, it's basically just a code for, I'm never gonna get laid and I'm insecure about it.
The other example that a lot of people were using, in actually fairly similar context is to edgy, which again I did have a problem with, is emo. That got overused, and it was basically, I'm really bored with scenes that have emotions in it, and it was basically redirecting that at people who, if they weren't going through depression, were just teenagers trying to figure things out, you know?
Yeah, and essentially, let me just translate the code for that. I'm an emotionally stunted teenager.
Yeah, that was basically it. Especially when a lot of the time it was people yelling, why are you being emo? Grow the f*** up, you're emo! As if that would somehow get over their depression.
Yeah, like, real sensitive people online. It's the truth of the universe. You will never find compassion like you'll find in the YouTube comments.
So, yeah, long story short, we're gonna have to respectfully disagree with this one, Vice, mainly because I don't think it's gotten that overused yet, and it is still addressing a thing that is constant, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's very specifically directed at a very laughable phenomenon, and again, I'm gonna make a comparison here, and this one I hope is more broad-reaching. It's comparing something deemed as edge to something that isn't. It's like comparing Stephen King to the works of a true edgelord like William Johnstone and his horrible post-apocalyptic series. Like, you never see Stephen King qualified as edge because, yeah, his works are uniformly pretty horrifying, but he's an author you can take seriously.
Yeah, exactly that. He writes dark elements, but it's more in the nature of the story, as opposed to, this will get my story recognition!
Yeah, and let me add to that, this will get me recognition whether it's good or bad!
Indeed, yes.
Leroy Jenkins. Our next question comes from IZ.
What are the most inspirational shows, movies, or characters that you've seen? Positive inspiration, mind you.
What a doozy.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many ways to take this question. Like, just in terms of style, I would say movies like Hero were inspirational to me, just in terms of visual cinematography and how everything's, like, so colorful and pops out. Shows like Spectacular Spider-Man, and technically it's a game, but Wind Waker also influenced the way I design and draw characters. I believe I've mentioned before Lloyd Irving kind of inspired my personal philosophy of always trying to get along with people and, just genuinely be respectful of other people.
Actually, it's funny you should bring that up, because Lloyd is an inspiring character, I'll agree with you on that, and I would add to that by suggesting sort of a similar character in Zidane from Final Fantasy IX, whose whole philosophy in life is, I don't need a reason to help people.
Yeah, that is definitely a positive quality to take with you.
I mean, if we're going for overall life philosophy-inspiring movies, real quick I'll bring up The Shawshank Redemption, even though at times it gets very horrible and you want to punch certain people in the face, but that's Stephen King. One of the ending quotes, though, is the quote by which I live. Hope is a good thing, and no good thing ever dies.
Nice.
And I think that's a quote to go on in times like these whenever people are trying to be edgy. Self-reference!
Indeed, yes. Oh man, it's really hard to think of this stuff on the spot.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's not that we're lacking for examples, it's that there are actually a lot of good ones.
Yeah, again, it's, I guess the specifics of the inspiration. I mean, Tales of Berseria, especially Velvet, for me, a good inspiration of how to manage morally grey and or traumatized characters, for lack of a better term. Black Panther was inspirational in the way it handled showing a completely new culture.
That's a good way of presenting that movie, and I'll agree with you on that. Even though I haven't seen it, I agree with what it's done.
Yeah, I would totally recommend it. It is such a fun film.
Another one to add to the list, along with Wonder Woman. Speaking of which, Wonder Woman, for a whole host of reasons.
Oh god, yes. I would elaborate, but I still need to see that movie. But
yeah, I haven't personally seen it, but just everything about the message and the sheer ass-kicking power of the character. Daniel Bryan fingers, yes, yes, yes.
So, yeah, those are the inspirations we can think of off the top of my head. And maybe one day we'll come back to this question and go in more detail, but...
In fact, we may even want to use it as a discussion topic for whenever we don't have anything to review or countdown.
That is true, actually.
Honestly, it's a great topic to discuss. I just wish we had more time to think of examples on the spot so we didn't disappoint poor IZ.
Indeed. But we have one more question of IZ, so maybe we can make it up to him for this one. His second question tonight is...
Do you like or dislike when a movie prioritizes political agendas over plot?
It depends. Because I'm a sucker for social commentary. Jonin knows all about some of the issues I've touched upon in our stories like Stranded Anubis, My Story, Only Darkness... Even in casual stories that I didn't write specifically to touch upon or joke about political issues, I like to tie in some sort of social commentary. But the thing is, whenever there's not a good plot backing it up, it looks ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the best way to sum it up. I mean, first off, I will say, apologies, those stories aren't available yet. But maybe.
Maybe one day. I make no promises, though, because I write at the pace of molasses floating through space.
That's kind of appropriate, since I believe Only Darkness is a space story. But anyway.
Actually, it is.
But, yeah. I'm not with you. I don't mind social commentary in it, especially since in the current age of the internet, just mentioning anything about gender, race, or the name of the president is political these days. I don't know why I did the quotation marks. You can't see me, but...
I could hear the quotation marks in your voice. What a phrase.
But, yeah, I... pretty much agree with you. You do need a good plot to back it up, or at least a good allegory, otherwise it falls apart. The other thing I will say is that you need to know what the hell you're talking about in your social commentary, or it falls apart. And there are
God, no kidding. I'll talk about that.
Yeah, and there are two examples I can think of. I mean...
Oh god, yeah, and, let's just say that I've read plenty of stories with that veiled intention. Thank you very much, American conservatives. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. There are two examples I can think of. First off is from the comic Amazon's Attack. Some of you may know about this if you watched Linkara's review of it. In fact, it was one of the first he did. But basically, it goes like this. The Amazons are invading America, and halfway through it, the current president, who is a thinly veiled an allegory of George Bush, introduces the McCarran Act. And the McCarran Act is a very thinly veiled parody of the Patriot Act. And it's trying to set him up as the villain, that he is going to round up Amazons who are living in America and detain them and put them in camps.
Hey, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, and his aide goes, it'll be controversial to say the least. I don't care. The people need to see a strong leader. But this is the thing. The Patriot Act was a complete load of BS, and yeah, you are perfectly right to make fun of it, but here's the thing. The context is completely different. Like, the Patriot Act was basically a reaction to the fact that after 9/11, America, and let's be fair, Britain as well, were terrified of the idea that terrorists could come up from anywhere. They could be hiding amongst us. They could be plotting their plans, and who knows when they'll strike. So it was basically an overreaction to that. It was a panicky reaction that says, hey, we're definitely hunting down those terrorists. Look, we're locking people up left, right, and center. But the thing is, in this situation, it is full-on war. You don't need to hunt for potential terrorists, because guess what? The army is on your doorstep and loudly proclaiming, hi, we're right here, we're wrecking your stuff and killing your army. You know?
And I mean, it's not even comparable to the closest thing that I think of, which was Japanese internment in World War II. I mean, that was another load of crap, because it was basically just blanketly proclaiming all Japanese Americans to be traitors and throwing them into internment camps. It was a load of crap, because for one, it wasn't true, and for two, the Japanese posed absolutely no direct threat or whatsoever to our shoreline. Sure, they posed a threat to Hawaii, but that's nothing compared to having an army literally on your border.
Mm-hmm. And then the second example is, oh god, I know I'm gonna get some flack for this, but Terry Parker and Matt Stone, aka South Park.
Oh, sweet Christ, South Park. Oh, God.
Yeah, there's the thing.
Crawling in my skin. These two make me feel an existential despair, which I can't really put a name to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of always flip-flopping on South Park because it can be genuinely funny. The problem is, I used to think they were incredibly wise and smart when I'm a teenager. Then I grew up and learned how the world works, and then I realized, oh, they really don't know what the hell they're talking about, do they? Because here's the thing. They used to have the whole, I learned something today as a parody of cartoons that used to end like that. But then it became a way for them to shove in their own political ideals, and a lot of them are basically just observations by jaded rich white guys. One example I remember clearly was there was this episode where Cartman throws a rock at a black kid in his school named Token. Get it? Because he's the token black kid. Ha 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 ha.
Wow, you two. And wow.
He's about to be punished by the school, but then lawyers come in saying that he has committed a hate crime, and he gets rushed into prison. Now, obviously, it's meant to be a really, really bad parody of the overreaction at PC Brigade and all that, which it's about as funny as you expect, but honestly, it wasn't the main focus of the episode the longest time. It was just Cartman goes to jail, here's the reason why, and here's some hijinks. But the bit that actually kind of proves how much they didn't know what they were talking about was the way they get Cartman out of it is that Stan, Kyle, and Token present a presentation to the local attorney, which is hate crimes, a savage hypocrisy, and essentially their argument was all crimes are hate crimes because ultimately you hate the target of the crime. Their examples being vandalizing a government building and killing someone for sleeping with your wife. Therefore, we should have the same laws and the same punishments for every crime.
Boy.
Yeah, there is so many flaws in that statement, I don't know where to begin. Like, yeah, granted, it's meant to be fairly comedic because the only reason the boys are doing it is because they need to get Cartman out of jail because he is ballast for their sledding race. But the thing is, I'm pretty sure the hate crime punishments are not that severe compared to punishments for normal crimes, especially since when it's pointed out now that a lot of the time they do not get punished or reported on, but
Yeah, especially where I live. Dear God.
Yeah, and it's also that kind of sad logic you see a lot of on the internet. Well, punching a black guy isn't a hate crime, because surely punching anyone's a hate crime. It's like, no, but when the motive is very specifically racial, then yeah, it's a hate crime.
Yeah, pretty much. It's really just a matter of hugely missing the point. Yeah, there's hate involved in every crime, and may I just point out that vandalizing a government building is definitely not a hate crime, it's a favor to humanity. But... chaotic good, everyone. But really the point of the hate crime thing is to just acknowledge that, yes, there was a very clear motive behind this, and it wasn't just and giggles.
Yeah, and that's kind of what happens in a lot of South Park with Trey Parker and Matt Stone, is that you make fun of something, but you completely miss the point, or it comes from a very warped perspective. Recently, during the whole presidential election, they were like, they're both as bad as each other, so it's not really going to affect anything. No, it's not going to affect you, because you are privileged white people, basically.
Yeah, and they just add to that point, you look at where America is now, guys.
Well, this is the thing. They've got a show which they'll be able to make money, and they'll be able to continuously bitch about the government without consequence, because it's South Park. They can pretty much get away with anything at this point, and they know it.
Yeah, and that's sort of the problem. On another note, speaking of just various ways that writers just don't know what they're talking about, I have a less, I guess, damaging and ignorant example, but one that's no less silly. Let's compare for a second the works of Terry Pratchett and Stephen King. Terry Pratchett's writing was almost exclusively satire and social commentary, specifically commentary on issues that were directly affecting British culture at the time. And he was extremely well-versed on it, very knowledgeable, and clearly did his research. Stephen King, on the other hand... Oh, dude, Steve, I love you, but please stop making references to current events.
Yeah.
Just stop. You are a white Northeasterner born in 1947, and you have explicitly said that you hate doing research. Stop trying. I mean, this is a guy whose writing has actually at one point caused me to think that is not how black people work. And yet, in almost every book he writes, he feels the need to include some reference to his feelings toward current, mostly conservative politics. And I mean, I agree with the dude, but... for God's sake, you don't know about what you're talking about. Shut up!
Oh, these... Well, we've got a rant about politics, Stephen King, and Trey Parker and Matt Stone. So if you're still listening, your reward is now a double dose of 2 junky questions. So...
Oh boy. Our first question from the illustrious one reads,
Could a question asked by a crow to a pebble be a question at all?
in dictionary terms it is, because, I mean, any question asked to anything is a question. Man, I'm really rambling over this one.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends which philosophical route you want to go down. One could ask, does a question need to be understood in order to be asked? But then, if someone doesn't hear the question, then is it a question or just a series of words?
Okay, philosophically speaking, that is a fair assessment. Now, I will say this, it is definitely a question if the crow is questioning the boulder. Sorry, bad Avatar reference.
Right, okay, that... Is a reference when it goes completely over your head? But anyway...
I'm not sure it actually is, because that's happened to me multiple times. I've had a long time to really come to the conclusion that a reference that completely goes over someone's head is just someone trying too hard.
I guess you could say I inadvertently stonewalled you.
I am so proud.
And whilst my soul dies internally, we all know the final question from both Too Junky and this month's podcast is...
Do you fear the day where you run out of questions?
Yes, we do.
Why do you think we keep plugging this?
Why do you think there's desperation in our voices whenever we ask for more questions?
I mean, not only is it nice to get feedback from the fans, but we generally do feel that the Q&A session does give us the chance to just talk about everything and everything, and sometimes we do get some really good discussions out of it. So, yeah, keep sending us the questions if you can think of them, guys, or maybe encourage your friends. We accept anything, even if it's stupid or just completely insane in the case of two junkies.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, who doesn't like a little insanity in their lives? It's the entire point of Woken Matt Hardy.
Indeed. And I can try and learn more about other series if you want to have more specific questions. I mean, I've played a Fate Stay Night game now. I've no idea what happened in it, but I've played a game.
That's like me anytime I try to watch an episode of JoJo.
Oh dear. But yes, with that ends our Q&A session. So once again, can you tell we're desperate for this? Send in questions. Always send in questions.
Send us questions.
Send us questions.
I'm glad you got in on that one.
Indeed. But in the meantime, the show must go on, and for the first time this year, we see the return of
Crusader Countdowns!
Sup.
This is the section where we do a very special top 10. Well, we say top 10, it's more like a top 5 split between the two of us, on a variety of subjects. And in this case, well, this is our thought process. We were originally going to do top 10 fight scenes, but then we kind of realized, oh my god, that opens up a huge can of worms. So, after some thinking about it, we decided to narrow it down to something very specific. The top 10 duels in fiction. As in, a fight between two characters specifically.
To narrow it down some, I'm sort of imagining one-on-one fights built up to be the culmination or a huge moment in a character's story arc. A fight between, say, the protagonist of a story and the first kobold he encounters is technically a duel, but there's not much meaning to it.
Indeed, yes. So it has to be a duel with some meaning, and again, specifically one character versus another. Like, yeah, you could add Frieza versus Goku, but then technically Goku is interrupting a fight that has already been going on for ages. So technically it's between Frieza versus Goku, Krillin, Gohan, Vegeta, and Piccolo.
In other words, it's a party. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. And as always, we should have the caveat that these are our personal favourites from the media we've seen.
Yeah, this is by no means objective.
Yeah, so if there was a one-on-one fight you think should have been in there, or is one that you personally love, by all means, get the discussion going and mention it in the comments.
That's what they're there for. Also questions.
Indeed. And now,
It's time to duel!
so I guess I'll go first, and oh boy. There were multiple duels I can think of, specifically since, spoiler warning, a lot of mine come from martial art movies. This was a pretty close contest on the number 5 spot, and many of them are obviously bring up in honorable mentions, but one I will quickly bring up is that the number 6 spot is the fight between Flying Snow and Moon from the movie Hero. The fight is a nice story, and the visuals are amazing. Think Dragon Ball if it was drawn by a classical painter. But as much as I love it, it's not that significant to the plot of the overall movie, so with the rules we set out, that's why it got bumped down to number 6. Plus, the one at number 5 only needs a bit more love since I don't think many people have seen it. Number 5 goes to Dope vs. Den from Rope-a-Dope 2, Revenge of the Martial Arts Mafia.
What a title!
Yeah, that's its official title, but if you looked it up on YouTube, the title is, and I quote, Groundhog Day 2, Rope-a-Dope 2.
That's legitimately epic.
This is a movie that's on YouTube, and it was created by Eric Jacobus, who also stars as Dope. And the movie in itself is pretty funny. He's essentially trapped in a Groundhog Day loop, except the catalyst for restarting the time loop is every time he gets punched, he goes back to the beginning of the day. So the original Rope-a-Dope has him continuously being beaten up by said members of the martial arts mafia. And by the way, I still love that as a name for a group of villains. But
I do too, it's epic.
But yeah, the original plot of the first movie, which is okay, it's him getting continuously beaten up until he learns to start looking up martial arts handbooks and knows how they're gonna fight until eventually he manages to kick all of their asses. However, the main leader, or at least the leader of the group from the Mafia he was fighting, who turns out to be named Den, is also in his own time loop, which then starts the sequel, which is an extension of that concept where the two of them are now trying to go to war with each other, except every time they knock each other out, that person then goes back with their memories intact, so they keep one-upping each other. Like, one of the scenes at the start is they initially meet each other and pretend to shake their hands, but Den, being the villain of the year, brings out a bottle and clubs him over the head. So the dope then goes back, so he knows what's coming, blocks the bottle and hits him in the face. Den then takes that knowledge and replaces the bottle with a baseball bat, so whilst dope does block it, it hurts like hell. And it just spirals on for that until finally dope just goes straight to the headquarters of the martial arts mafia and manages to beat up all of them except for Den, which leads into the one-on-one dueling question. And oh wow. Given that these are essentially guys creating internet content, this duel is amazing. Like, the main reason it's here, it's purely for the choreography. Like, just wow. It's on the same level of Jackie Chan stuff.
Okay, you have my attention.
I think it's very clear that Eric Jacobus is inspired by Jackie Chan because his directorial style is very similar. The fact that he doesn't resort to shaky cam or extreme close-ups or anything alike. He gets guys who obviously have been trained to fight, and the camera is very steady and shows very clearly, okay, this guy is fighting that guy, you see all of the punches, and it also, as you see from the bloopers, he does very similar Jackie Chan stunts. Like, I forgot to mention this, at the start of the duel, Den is wielding a kendo stick, Dope is wielding a walking stick.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm suddenly reminded of my number 5 spot.
Nice. It's kind of same thing. It's not just the fight and the cinematography, it's that, what many people don't realize about Jackie Chan is that the reason why he's able to do, like, cool visual stunts, like, one example Jackie mentions is throwing the fan and catching it on the return path in the middle of a fight. A lot of people say, wow, Jackie is good. He says, actually, no, you can do it. It's a question of whether you have the patience or not. Because it's not that he practices that skill, it's the fact that he's willing to do 120 takes before he gets that one shot where it actually looks right. And they do have the exact same idea, because the reason I mentioned the weapons right at the start is that they do very similar things with it. He spins it around to block one of the kendo strikes, then spins it back over his shoulder to block another kendo strike, and there's one moment where it's pulled out of his hands because it's hooked on the kendo stick, but he then grabs it as it spins around on the stick and then uses it to block another attack.
Oh my
god,
Jackie.
Yeah, and then during the credits they show that, yeah, that took a lot of time because there were so many times it screwed up, it wasn't even funny.
Wow, I'm immediately impressed.
Yeah, this is on YouTube, so I thoroughly encourage everyone to check it out. And now, it is a silent comedy, so there's like little bits of character in here, but not much. That's why it's mainly down for the number 5 spot for just straight up good martial arts comedy, silent comedy, and just all-around choreography. I cannot recommend this enough. And if Eric Jacobus doesn't end up directing or starring in some action movies of the future, there's no justice in this one, I'm sorry.
I would agree.
But yeah, that's my number 5 spot. Sven, over to you.
It's funny you should mention weirdly, obscurely amusing improvised weapons, because that's gonna play a part in my number 5 spot. From Les Miserables, Valjean versus Javert, the singing duel. Jonin can back me up on the fun factor of this one. It's a very serious scene, obviously, because it's Les Mis. Basically the only comedy you have comes in the form of the Thénardiers, and they're not exactly what you would call straightforward comedy. But The very idea of a duel that is punctuated by an impassioned character reaffirming musical number on both sides, while one side fights with a fencing rapier and the other side fights with a 2x4, is just all sorts of awesome.
Indeed. This is the movie version, right? Because I don't think it happens at every stage performance.
Well, it happens in a variation in the stage performances, except in most of those it's Valjean literally fighting Javert off with a chair, but I am specifically referring to the Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe version in the 2012 movie, or as I personally know it, Russell Crowe's single time in the sun in that movie.
Yeah, in a movie which he does get a lot of flack for, unfortunately. But yeah, even if we were just talking about the song itself, I would 100% agree, just because I think I've played some clips of it before when we reviewed Les Miserables, but it is entirely a duel where the two start off arguing with each other, and then you get to the main part of the song where you actually do need two people to sing this song, because they start off doing a call and response to each other, and then when you get to the main thing, it is the two of them both singing separate songs at each other.
Yeah, and the setup is super awesome too, because Valjean has reached a critical moment in his redemption arc, agreeing to find and take care of the sadly deceased Fantine's daughter, and then, because his entire life's purpose is to ruin people's enjoyment, Javert shows up and attempts to bring Valjean into the law. Naturally, with his new purpose in mind, Valjean does not take kindly to this, and the two of them duel with any arrangement of chair versus sword, 2x4 versus sword, bed railing versus sword, while the two of them basically just loudly proclaim their worldviews at one another. It seems basic, and it could be silly if written into any other musical, but here, oh, it's awesome. I would probably bump the Alfie Boe, Norm Lewis version above this musically, but they don't include the really awesome improvised weapon duel, which makes the movie version just that much cooler.
Yeah, I will freely admit that's part of the reason why I was thinking they didn't have to fight the stage version, but yeah, if nothing else, it is awesome to see two people swinging weapons at each other whilst also singing at each other.
Yeah, and again, it's basically a character-establishing moment with Valjean firmly in the chaotic good territory, and Javert proclaiming the virtues of the lawful neutral alignment, also revealing a nugget about his past that pretty much fuels what we know of his character going forward from that moment. That is that he was born in destitution in a prison and lived his life according to the exact opposite of the circumstance of his birth, which, as far as deepening a character that so far has been nothing but an authoritarian bully goes, good job to the producers of Les Mis, because it really works to humanize him.
Indeed, yes, or at the very least, it gives a reason for why he's unsympathetic, because I believe the exact line is, "Do not talk to me of crime or the price he had to pay," which is basically him saying, yeah, that's a really nice sob story. I was in tragic circumstances too, but I'm on the side of the law, you're not. I have no sympathy.
Yeah, essentially that. It doesn't make him any more of a pleasant character, but it does establish why this terrifying force of nature with a coat and a badge has become the antagonist he has. And with the parameters we established for this, that's what put this at number 5 over some of my honorable mentions, because it reestablishes Valjean's character and moves him forward in his story, and it actually starts to establish Javert, which is very important. Also, it's a singing duel where one party is wielding a 2x4.
Yeah, you really can't top that. Or can you? Because there are 4 other things above it.
Yeah, in fact, technically 9 other things. Back to you, Jonin.
So, with number 4, I mentioned that Eric Jacobs is inspired by Jackie Chan, but we did have to include a fight for the master. And this one is one of my personal favourites. Thomas versus... Hang on, let me look this up. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. The guy doesn't have a name. Thomas versus Henchman from Meals on Wheels.
Wow. Wow. The old X-Blades joke comes back with a vengeance.
Yeah, unfortunately, this guy doesn't have a name. In fact, he very rarely speaks throughout the film, but I might as well call him Benny, because if you're going by actors, it's basically Jackie Chan versus renowned kickboxer Ben Urquidez. Apologies if I got that name wrong.
Valiant effort.
But yeah, this fight is included for pretty much the same reasons as number 5. Jackie Chan's style of filming and choreography is how I prefer action movies to be shot. I really do not like the shaky cam nonsense or the random close-ups of crowd people that is so obviously there to disguise the fact that something went wrong in editing, or they didn't have enough time to prep the actors for choreography, so they're trying to sell you how violent it is, even though it looks so naff. But
in other words, it's basically just a filmography version of the one Weird Al lyric. Something went screwy, and before you knew, he was trying to kill everyone.
But the fact that Benny doesn't have a name is kind of sad, because this is a combination of the fight. This is from the movie Meals on Wheels, and it is kind of a goofy movie, as the title implies. But, I mean, the plot, just to show how goofy it is, Thomas and David are two Chinese people who run a Meals on Wheels van in Spain, because why not? And they happen to come across a girl who's being kidnapped by some thugs, although it turns out that is... Oh my god, this plot is so stupid when you say it out loud. Who, it turns out, is the heiress to a noble house and potentially the royal family. It's,
fair enough.
But when you first meet these two, Benny and another guy named Keith Vitali, they are new thugs brought in by the main villain. Their introduction is actually pretty cool and also funny, given that it is Jackie Chan, because Thomas and David see these two guys approaching and they're like, you know what, we've been kicking these nameless thugs left, right and centre. We have no problem dealing with this. So they see these two walking up and they sort of give a knowing smile like, yeah, we've got this. They get into a fighting stance and then the two of them get their ass whooped. This is subtitles. The dialogue is literally this. They're skillful. They're powerful. Run away!
Oh, so basically me in any fighting situation.
So they have various encounters, and Benny and his pal are always on top of them every single time. But eventually, the girl they're defending ends up being kidnapped, and so they are literally trying to rescue a princess from a castle. My god, this movie is so goofy.
Oh my god. That's so ridiculous. I'm just laughing my ass off.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly it is a comedy, but still, whilst admittedly it's an ensemble piece because there are multiple fights going on, but really, the main piece is between Thomas and Benny, and like I said, the cinematography is really good, and it has another key feature of Jackie Chan's style that makes it entertaining. For one, he will frequently use the environment in the fights in order to make some cool shots. Like, they're fighting in the middle of what is essentially this big dining hall in the castle. And there's this moment when Benny is just wailing on Thomas, who can only desperately block, and he's got his back against the table. And as Benny continues to wail on him, punching him back, the table is actually pushed backwards as well. There's even one shot where Benny goes for a kick at Thomas, who ducks just the right time, and there's a series of lit candles behind him which all get snuffed out thanks to the wind of that kick.
Wow, that's awesome.
So yeah, in terms of just cinematography, it's all very good. However, the reason I put this slightly above the Dope vs. Dead fight is because there is another cool twist which shows what I'm looking for in a fight. What I like in a fight is when a character doesn't just win because they're stronger. They either have to win through either perseverance or using their head a little bit. And in this case, Thomas is getting desperate because it's clear that if they just continue straight up fighting like this, Benny is gonna win no matter what. So he decides to have a change of tactic and goes, okay, calm down. Treat this like a training session. He gets up, grabs a chair, and then just sits down and goes, okay, hold on, I'm just going to take a breath a moment, whilst Benny just gives him a look of, what? And then he gets up and goes, okay, one more time. And the rest of the fight is Thomas essentially doing stuff like this. He's not getting into a fighting stance, just sort of casually walking around, occasionally dodging kicks, doing some more flashier moves and random taunts and stretching and stuff like that. And it throws Benny off because it's such a bizarre thing to do in a fight, and eventually that gives him the edge. No, not straight away. And this is another positive element of the fight, because just because Thomas has come up with this idea, that doesn't mean Benny's skill and advantages instantly disappear. Because there are many times where Benny just goes, oh, you know what, enough of this shit, and smacks Thomas in the face, and even gets him into dangerous situations, like when he managed to get him in a headlock, and literally the only way Thomas can get out of it is by tickling his armpit just to get out.
Oh my god. This is the most epic thing I've ever imagined.
Yeah, it's fun, but it still keeps up that level of tension because, like I said, it's still establishing that Benny is a threat, and just goofing around isn't gonna beat him on its own. It's about opening him up to those hits, because there's one moment when Thomas essentially spams a taunt at him, goes, come on, come on, come on, and that just leads to Benny just smack him into the face and sending him into the floor.
Oh god, I'm just imagining the Captain Falcon taunts.
Basically, yeah. Long story short, it's a really well-filmed fight, save for one really bad instances of slow motion, and it wouldn't matter so much if it wasn't the one strong blow Thomas does manage to land, which is key to turning the fight around, is really unconvincing slow-mo, but otherwise, it's still a really fantastic fight, and like I said, it's an example of great choreography, but also, I guess for lack of a better term, a great dynamic between the two characters in that you know why Thomas won, but he still had to work for it. It wasn't just, oh, I'm not going to take this seriously and I win. It's, okay, I'm confusing him a little bit, but I still have to kind of be on my guard here.
Yeah, and I like that. I love when there's a tactical element to a fight.
Yeah, if Shonen battles didn't tend to be all almost together, I probably would include some of the more tactical ones, because, yeah, like you, I do like it when people are a bit more tactical all of the fight, but, yeah, long story short, this is a good fight, and I would recommend people looking it up on YouTube if you're curious.
Excellent. I probably will, because that's so absurd I have to watch it now. Now, speaking of absurd movies with sort of unbefittingly awesome duels, on my end, number 4 from The Princess Bride, Inigo versus Count Rugen. The legendary fencing duel of cinema that gave birth to the legendary phrase, "You killed my father, prepare to die."
I will admit I haven't seen The Princess Bride. It's on my to-do list, don't worry.
I mean, if nothing else, just watch this duel, because for such a ridiculous fantasy satire, the duel itself is so amazingly set up. It's very simple. Count Rugen, the dragon to the completely useless big bad Prince Humperdinck, killed Inigo Montoya's father when he was a child, and Inigo wants revenge. Very straightforward, but it's set up in such a sympathetic and personal way through the movie that you actually get into the plot line, even though the summary of it is Inigo's phrase, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die." That is the entire plot line, but it's set up so well, and you sympathize with Inigo, not least because his actor is one of the most charming human beings ever to walk the planet. You sympathize with him so much, and you get into the plot, and you want payoff so badly that despite the film being so ridiculous, the end result and the duel that ensues is 100% legitimately, unironically awesome. Now, it's funny. I'm all for super cinematography and choreography heavy duels. This one is just as simple as the setup. It's just two dudes fencing in a torture chamber.
Huh.
That sounds more metal than I thought it would. But it's just the way it's set up and the way the characters interact and behave that makes it so iconic. Like, from the start, because he's a heel, to use wrestling terms, Count Rugen uses all sorts of cheating tactics in the book to get the upper hand, including ambushing Inigo with the throwing knife, which sets him off his guard and lets Rugen get a huge, huge upper hand against him. But then something happens as Inigo reminds himself of what he's fighting for. He gets that fabled heroic second wind, bats back Rugen's sword, and as if no injury was sustained, just keeps fighting and turns the tables. And you know, Jonin, how much I love an underdog coming back from the jaws of defeat.
Oh, yes. Tactical duels are fun, but sometimes it's fun just to see someone fighting through sheer force of will.
Yeah, and another trope I love, of course, is the heroic second wind, and man, does that play into effect here. Just the sight of Inigo turning the tides against his personal demon, a character who through the course of the movie has been unironically awful. Like, Rugen is a master torturer. You want to see him pay. And to see it finally play out is just so satisfying. Topped off by that final line while Rugen is at Inigo's mercy. He tries to make a cheap killing blow while Inigo's talking, and Inigo, skewering him, says, "I want my father back, you son of a bitch."
Nice.
One of the coolest ending one-liners. It's like the one-liners delivered by Percy in Critical Role. It's, in a way, very cheesy, but also supremely effective, because it just punctuates that satisfying payoff.
Yeah, I definitely need to check this out, because so far the only clip I have seen is the "but I am not left-handed" duel. That already looked like a cheesy but fun scene, so yeah, I think I need to check this out.
You really do. I mean, the movie has Andre the Giant in it.
Nice.
How can you go wrong? And yeah, again, just for the clever ways the movie sets up everything, especially this duel, which is pretty much the final boss fight since Humperdinck is completely useless and it shows in the final scene with him. This is pretty much the final physical payoff of The Princess Bride, and man, for such a straightforward comedic movie with such a straightforward plot that it's set up, it's super satisfying.
Awesome.
Sometimes less is more.
Alright, moving on to my number 3, and this one's kind of an interesting one. See, it is technically a mid-act duel, so it's not exactly final boss or anything, but it's still one that's pretty significant to this film. The number 3 spot is Yunjia versus O'Brien from the movie Fearless. And I should have mentioned the movie Fearless from 2006, because of course there are multiple movies named Fearless.
Yeah, it's sort of a popular title.
The long and short of it is, Fearless is a movie I don't see talked about very much, but it features a fantastic performance by Jet Li as protagonist Julien, and I do recommend seeing it just because I really like the main arc he goes through. In fact, spoiler warning, it may have been the inspiration for a certain D&D character I play, but
I know which one.
There is another cool element to this fight aside from the character arc though, although that is still a pretty big thing. One thing that happens a lot in action movies, and I don't just mean China when I'm talking about this, I mean generally all over the world, is that people often tend to be obsessed with their own setting. In American action movies, like, everything is American except for possibly the villain. Like, everything's set in America, everyone uses American fighting styles and colloquialisms. Same with Kung Fu movies. Everything's set in China, you get to see everyone uses Chinese Kung Fu, etc. What I like about this, because Fearless is a semi-autobiographical, and I say semi-autobiographical because whilst it's a good story, it's very, very loosely based on what is supposed to be founder of the Jinwu Sports Federation, but
fair enough.
But because it's semi-autobiographical, the one cool feature of those kind of stories is that it reveals a truth about the world, which a small minority of people will fight against no matter how futile it is. Cultures mix. They intermingle, and there will always be different culture clashes. Specifically, this is Jet Li, a Chinese martial arts master, versus Nathan Jones, an American wrestler.
Oh yeah! Nathan Jones, he of the exceptionally unfortunate WWE run. He does look impressive, though.
Indeed, and that's very good for the premise of this particular fight, because at this point, like I said, Zhu Yan used to be a very talented but very arrogant fighter, but then, for reasons I won't spoil for anyone who does want to check it out, he's humbled and has now decided to come back and help people however he can. And at this point, China has been, well, for lack of a better term, conquered by all the individual foreign powers, and one of the ways they try to keep people in line is by holding what are essentially propaganda shows, because the announcer introduces O'Brien and essentially to try and demoralize the Chinese people by going, "See, this incredible man from Europe, this hulking giant, this eighth wonder of the world who could stop a locomotive with one hand and crush a Chinese man with one finger." I'm not kidding, that's a line he actually uses.
Classy. Very classy.
So, in order to start somewhat of a revolution, Zhou Jia decides that he is going to accept what is an open challenge for any Chinese man to take on O'Brien, which is meant to be a propaganda show of natural Western strength. But the fight becomes a lot more even and starts somewhat of a revolution amongst the Chinese populace.
And anyone who knows me can vouch that I love a good revolution. Wait, did I say that out loud?
So yeah, this leads into the fight itself, which, again, is a really interesting mix of different styles, because American wrestling and Chinese martial arts aren't something you normally see crossing with each other. Well, there is strong style, but that's a whole different kettle of fish, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there is Shinsuke Nakamura, but this is sort of a different issue we're dealing with.
So, this is your classic underdog David and Goliath story, but I will give credit to them that the fight itself is a bit more even. Like, it's not a case of this big hulking guy, he can't land a single hit. No, he does land several blows, and when he does manage to grab Zhu Yan, he throws him around like a ragdoll. And there are many moments when Zhu Yan tries to disable him with kicks to the gut, only for him to be stonewalled.
Ouch.
Zhu then has to play to the strength of Kung Fu, i.e. work the body, use their own weight against him, strike vitals, anything he can to make up for his strength disadvantage. Because, again, this is a guy who can and does throw him around using only one arm in what was, in hindsight, an optimistic attempt to keep him in an arm lock. But it's not only a great visual delight, especially when I forgot to mention that because this is all a big propaganda fest, it's taking place inside this circus tent, and there are two sets of audiences, one with the poverty-stricken Chinese citizens, and the, I believe the exact powers were British, Japanese, and Russian, I want to say, and they're all wearing top hats and monocles because, of course.
Wow. Again, classy? I'm getting the sense that this is a movie that somehow manages to insult both sides of the coin.
Well, yes and no, because it does actually show some good things about both sides, and this is what elevates it to the number 3 spot for me. Because, like I said, as well as using this moment to inspire a revolution, this is also marks the definitive change in Julien's character, because, again, and I won't go into the specifics because I'm not spoiling the movie, but Zhu Yan was a massive prick at the beginning of this. I mean, this is a guy who challenges someone to a death match and kills them on their birthday. That's how...
Oh my god! Happy birthday, f*** you!
Yeah, that's how much of a douche this guy used to be. I mean, he begins the match by refusing to sign the document that says, "Hi, are you okay with dying here?" on the grounds that he says, "It's a barbaric practice, I want to compete honorably to see who's the best," which unfortunately gets mistranslated because the interpreter decides just to be a dick to tell O'Brien he says he wants to kick your butt. But he is true to his word. There is one instance where he actively pulls what could have been a lethal blow at the last minute, because O'Brien bounces off the ropes and tries to essentially frog splash him. But Zhu Yan manages to maneuver it so that if he had continued the move, he could have easily impaled his throat with his elbow, for lack of a better term, so basically instantly killing him, and then chooses not to. So, satisfied that he's already got the win, he decides to leave. But O'Brien gets really pissed off and tries to attack him again, misses, And, well, there's another thing I forgot to mention. During the fight, O'Brien's being tossed around, and he's a big guy, so the shockwave damages the arena. Meaning, as he's about to fall over the ropes, he almost gets impaled on some of the nails that have been revealed as a result, but Julien steps in and saves him at the last minute.
Oh, hey, the Mick Foley save.
And after that, O'Brien gets up. He stares Julien down. He steps forward and Julien backs off because he's thinking, oh no, is this going to start again? And O'Brien then puts his hands together and says, Shi. And I apologise for that butchered pronunciation of what is the Chinese way of saying thank you.
Yeah, first of all, I'm just getting, like, a sense of the sort of mismatch you would get if you were to pair, say, Daniel Bryan against Braun Strowman, which is amusing in and of itself, but the storyline behind the fight is just so appealing.
Yeah, like I said, this is a key point that firmly establishes who Julien now is as a character, and establishes what the plot is going to be for the third act, because O'Brien is a really good, honourable guy, and he not only says thank you, but then does the whole wrestling thing of throwing up the victor's hands and letting the entire crowd shit near him, whilst a couple of the higher-ups in the audience glare as if going, this is going to be trouble.
Man, I gotta look into this movie, because everything about that is awesome.
And that is why this fight is at the number 3 spot. Sven, over to you.
Because I'm, ever more of a straightforward, less, I guess, widely cultured man than Jonin, my number 3 is probably a surprise to nobody familiar with film and or dueling. Number 3, from Return of the Jedi, Luke vs. Vader 2.
Well, in fairness, it is a good duel, so...
Yeah, I mean, obviously otherwise it wouldn't be here, but... At this point, I'm pretty sure everyone familiar with science fiction in any way knows how this duel goes down, but just in case, I'll give the rundown to our fans outside of the Star Wars fandom. The second duel, and what turns out to be the final duel between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, spoilers, Vader is his father. It was his sled! The second duel between them comes after what was essentially a curb stomp in Empire Strikes Back. And what almost looked to be becoming, or at least going in that direction, in Return of the Jedi, it's essentially the culmination of both characters' entire character arcs. Luke's slow slide toward morality not so great, and Darth Vader's slow slide toward, hey, maybe there's a human being in that suit after all. And it really all kicks off and snaps when Vader, in his infinite wisdom, decides to make a thinly veiled threat toward Leia. Spoilers, she's Luke's sister. It's weird. But yeah, Vader, in his infinite wisdom, decides to issue that threat, and Luke goes a little mad. First of all, may I point out that for 1983, this lightsaber duel is gorgeous. Just two silhouettes against a blackish-blue backdrop, lit only by their lightsabers, with Luke just absolutely wrecking the face of evil throughout the entire franchise. All keyed off with possibly one of the best soundtrack cues in Star Wars, and that's saying something coming from John Williams.
Yeah, this was a great finale to that duel, and it's something that you mentioned the thinly veiled threat to the sister. The only reason Vader knows Luke has one at this point is because, as Obi-Wan Kenobi's ghost, again, Star Wars is weird, said to Luke previously, bury your feelings deep down or they could be made to serve the Emperor. And when he's getting curb-stomped, Luke's fear gets the better of him, and that's how Vader is able to sense that he has a sister.
Yeah, so essentially through his uncertainty, Luke gives the game away, but in doing that, it leads to a sort of spiral of events that ends in Vader being pretty much destroyed, broken, and on the ground missing a hand. Again. It happens a lot in Star Wars. Honestly, it's a very straightforward ending to that entire plot arc, but as straightforward as it seems now, a story like that was sort of a big deal whenever this all came to pass in 1983, and it was a very satisfying ending to that entire plot arc, and directly it leads to the redemption of Darth Vader literally minutes later.
Well, mainly because Luke, I should mention that all this time, kind of like a very strange hype man, the Emperor's watching the whole thing in the background, and he's urging Luke on, like, yes, kill him and take his place by my side. Which is then where Luke, despite all of his flaws, is still able to control himself and makes the decision, no, I'm not going to kill my father. I'm sticking to my guns on this. Or lightsabers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, as the case may be. And Luke basically wipes the floor with Darth Vader, but in sort of the payoff to his storyline in Return of the Jedi, decides not to finish his single greatest enemy. And in doing so, retroactively, he triggers the fall of the Empire, because his show of mercy turns Darth Vader, who turns on Palpatine, throws him down a reactor shaft, and then Palpatine explodes because it's George Lucas.
That was so weird. But yeah, honestly, like you said, yeah, it was a great duel, a good send-off to the original trilogy. And also, I'd still say it's a fairly good duel now, because this is the thing, yeah, later Star Wars battles and stuff like the prequel trilogy would be faster and more acrobatic, but the thing is, those battles tend to have a lot less emotional stakes, at the very least in the choreography. Like, the Phantom Menace fight of the two Jedi against Darth Maul, that looks impressive, but then it's let down when you realise, oh, hang on, the emotion of the story doesn't affect anything going on here. I mean, for God's sake, there's this whole thing where, Qui-Gon is stabbed, everyone yells, no! And then he fights exactly the same way he did earlier.
Yeah, like, the duels in the prequels were visually impressive, but they were sort of let down whenever you realize that the prequels have all the emotional investment of wet tissue paper. It's why I was so glad to see J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson go back to sort of the more straightforward dueling style seen in, well, duels like Luke vs. Vader 2. It's just more impactful.
Like, I wouldn't mind the acrobatics if, again, there was actually an emotional point to the battles. I mean, they probably could have done some of the acrobatic stuff in the 1980s, but it was one of those weird things where Lucas kept changing his mind. I mean, Mark Hamill actually said that one of the things that annoyed him was, during the filming of these two movies, Lucas was adamant that our lightsaber weighed something like 40 pounds. You couldn't only use it with one hand because it would be wrenched out of your grip. And then cut to the prequels where they're spinning them around, doing the backflips, carrying them one-handed.
Oh god, I can only imagine how frustrated poor Mark Hamill must have been. And may I just add, logic? How does a light beam weigh anything?
Thinks up there's some line in the expanded universe about how it requires a lot of intensity to move it because the country. I don't know. Point.
I know that that's a thing. It came around in sort of the expanded universe where it was made very clear how much finesse was required to wield a lightsaber, but I do know this. A handle and a beam of light should weigh pretty much nothing. So,
yeah.
I don't know, Lucas logic. Anyway.
Yeah, I guess you could say that maybe it was a retcon for the better, because, yeah, it probably makes more sense to do wielded off-handed. But yeah, I'm getting off topic. Sven, this is your show, take it away.
Yeah, essentially, not much else to say. This was a fantastic, visually impressive, emotionally satisfying payoff to basically the entire original trilogy of Star Wars. And you must be wondering at this point, what could possibly top one of the most iconic duels in fiction? The answer is you'll see. Back to you, Jonin.
Indeed. But first, we get to my number 2 pick, and this is a fight that was always going to be in the top 5. The question was where? I will say that right up that this comes from Thunderbolt Fantasy, the Kung Fu Puppet series that is on Crunchyroll, and you all really should be watching, guys. But, any number of fights could have been on here because they all have great choreography, especially when you consider that they're puppets and a lot of the effects are practical, like especially stuff like when they're dodging arrows, people are actually firing arrows at the puppets, so and little stuff like that, which all makes it fun. But and of course there's the big bombastic soundtrack, and pretty much almost every single fight, especially when the hero is about to win, has the Thunderbolt fantasy theme kick in, so...
Yeah, and let me just vouch for that personally. That theme is cool as
Yeah, I mean, the lyrics are about as nonsensical as Baron Corbin's theme, but...
Yeah, roughly the synth's equivalent of Dragon Force.
Yeah. I mean, actually, yeah, Dragon Force would probably be a much better comparison, because for those who don't know, the lyrics are... The land is cloaked in deepest blue, shadow of eagles across the moon. You may not think it's easy now. With words can I sing. Whoa, 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 oh.
So far away, we wait for the day. I'm so sorry, everyone, for that wonderful serenade.
But yeah, there were multiple fights that could have been on here, but this one was always the one that stuck with me, basically because of its role in the finale, and also just the amazing character work, which is what bumped it up to number 2. I am speaking of the fight between, let's see if I can get these names pronunciations right, Lin Se-Yard versus Mei Tian-Hai, aka Enigmatic Gale versus the Bones of Creation.
Which, may I add, are incredible nicknames.
Yep. There are multiple names for his character, but those two are the most awesome ones. But anyway, so like I said, this takes place in the final episode of Season 1, and it's actually between the villain and a character who has, up until this point, always been someone on the sidelines. I briefly covered him in my review, and by the way, massive spoilers for the finale of this, because it's the only way I can talk about this fight, but Lin Se-Yard is going up against the main antagonist, what would normally be the final boss. The situation is, this whole thing has been about them trying to get back the Heaven's Retribution Sword, the only thing that can stop the Demon God, from Mei Tian-Hai. Now, originally they were wondering, why is he so keen to get this sword? Is it because he's hoping to tap into some great power? Is he trying to resurrect the demon? Etc, etc, etc. This is doubly interesting to Lin Se-Yard because, as I've mentioned, he is a chaotic, neutral, manipulative bastard who, he really gets his kicks off manipulating and tricking people, particularly villains, because, as he put it, it's no fun to manipulate good people because they fall for anything, but paranoid villains who think they're above it all, they are so much fun to defeat, so...
And I mean, sound logic, I guess?
It at the very least works for him. But anyway, Mei Tian-Hai eventually reveals that he honestly doesn't give a damn about any of that. The only reason he's getting it is that he's kind of following the logic of an MMO player. I want to be the best martial artist, and I want to have the best stuff. That is the only reason he's getting that sword. So once Lin Se-Yard realizes that, he goes, well, if I had known that was your motivation, then I would have done this a long time ago. He then pulls a sword out of nowhere and goes, on guard! Mei Tian-Hai's response is, okay, no, come on, be serious. We know you can't fight.
Wow, burn.
It would have been a sick battle, though. To cut a long story short, Lin Se-Yard actually turns out to be pretty adept with the sword, and after an impressive show of skill, which leaves Mei Tian-Hai incredibly stunned, he asks the question, wait, if you have sword skills this impressive, why on earth are you living as a thief and manipulator? Well, I grew bored of it. What? Well, I got good, but swordsmanship really bores me. No, I just prefer to manipulate people. It's a lot more fun, to be honest. And you have to understand here, Mei Tian-Hai, the best way you can describe him is he is a massive martial arts fanboy. Like, he has dedicated himself fully to being the best martial artist, the strongest in all the land, and his main goal is to have the best sword and be right at the top of the mountain. Almost kind of like an evil version of a shonen protagonist. I am going to be the ultimate swordsman. So hearing someone essentially saying, yeah, I am that good, but what's the point? It's boring. pisses him off so much.
Oh, this gonna be good.
So this gets into the duel proper, and it is essentially Mei Tianhai trying to crush Lin Zheya, and absolutely failing. Like, the more the duel goes on, the clearer it is that it is so one-sided, and he just gets more and more pissed off. How could someone so half-assed as you stand up against my sword? I won't accept this! Which is already cruel enough, but on top of that, Lin Zheya is taunting him the entire time by laying down some half-truths, some of which, yeah, as a martial artist, actually do make a lot of sense. Like he points out, the fact that you are trying to become a master above all else shows that you do not understand a thing. Sword mastery is not a mountain peak, but a bottomless ocean. The further you go down it, the more you begin to realize how deep and vast it is. And he's just continuously messing with his head the entire battle, like mocking the very ideas he stands for. This then leads into the climax where Mei Tianhai uses his ultimate attack, and because it's Thunderbolt Fantasy, the name is Hellborn Rebellion.
Again, amazing names.
In order to counter it, Lin Zheya responds with his special attack, Lunar Crater Vapor, and that's when the theme song kicks in. There's a big explosion, which then leads to multiple explosions. The landscape is destroyed. Dragon Ball Z stuff, basically. This would have been an incredibly entertaining duel on its own, because you've got everything. You've got visually impressive action and character work of the villain being completely dismantled by a manipulator, which is always fun to see. But what also elevates it is that there is a fun twist, because there's no real clear winner. In terms of physical prowess, yeah, Lin Zheya won hands down, and in fact, he had to idle insult to injury by pulling away his sword at the last moment so that it doesn't kill Mei Tianhai, and his reasoning is, I got so skilled in swordsmanship that I could eliminate all the villains in the world. But I don't believe in that. It's far better to make fun of the villains who embody it. This starts to break Mei Tianhai more than he is already, because he realizes, wait a minute, this grand battle was all to humiliate me?
Oh my god. Honestly, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy, but what a dick.
Yeah, but this is when the twist comes in, because he starts to laugh maniacally, and he is broken, but he then decides, okay, you know what? It seems I want to see despair on someone's face as well. So he then throws up the Heron's Retribution Sword, and then breaks it in half, impaling himself with one half of the sword, and then starts laughing maniacally, going, congratulations, Enigmatic Gale. Because of your love and mischief, you've doomed the world. How does it feel?
Wow. Lots of what a dick happening here.
Yeah. Ultimately, even though he physically won the duel, Lin Zheya is not happy with this. This also leads into, again, one of my favourite moments in the series, because I should mention that Lin Zheya, throughout the entire series, has been a guy who doesn't seem to be fazed by anything. He's the ultimate deadpan snarker, essentially. Like, the world could be on fire, and you can go, oh, well, this is an unfortunate circumstance. It would be good if we had some water around. You know, that kind of thing. But, seeing this absolutely pisses him off, because the best equivalent of this for Western audiences would be like someone like Poirot, or the Doctor, or Sherlock, were in the middle of their big speech about how they saw through the villain's plans, and the villain just killed themselves halfway through the speech. They're pissed off. He is angry that he does not get to see Mei Tianhai broken. He starts almost screaming at the corpse, going, to die laughing after facing me. How dare you? You should have been on your knees. You should have salty tears of regret. Isn't that why you were born?
Wow. Just It's amazing the mileage you can get out of dick versus dick. So don't take that out of context.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and that's really why I love this duel so much, because in literally any other series, just to take a random example, Game of Thrones, the manipulator would have come out on top. He would have seen his broken victim and walked away into the sunset going, haha, God, I'm good. Thunderbolt Fantasy is one of the few series that actually calls out the manipulator archetype and says, hi, not only are your plans ridiculously complicated, but maybe messing with mentally unstable people is not the best tactic to use all the time.
Yeah, maybe unwise, just a little.
Yeah, so that's really why this duel is at number 2. There is amazing character work and just the ambiguous nature of who really won the duel in the end. That's what won me over.
Oh my god. I don't blame you. That is incredible. At number 2 on my end, incidentally sort of playing on a theme I touched upon in Luke vs. Vader, I have a rare video game entry. I hesitated to really include many of these because when you think about it, any fight in a video game is a duel. But this one, just for the circumstances surrounding it and the build-up, I think really fit the criteria. From Tales of Symphonia, number 2, Lloyd versus Kratos.
Yeah, the one-on-one duel, mainly with the player character and another character, is indeed a staple in the Tales of series, but Lloyd and Kratos, especially for Western audiences, is perhaps the most iconic one.
Yeah, for a number of reasons. Okay, first of all, spoiler. Again, Kratos is Lloyd's father. Because that's a thing that happens a lot in fiction. I mentioned in our top 5 boss fights countdown the midway showdown with Remiel. There was another aspect to that duel that I really didn't touch upon, and that was Kratos' betrayal immediately after the fact. Essentially, from that point until the point where Lloyd faces off with Kratos, this duel between the two of them has sort of been the promised payoff to that entire storyline. And when I say it pays off, I mean it really pays off. This fight is epic. If I hadn't chosen the boss battle against Remiel for the reasons I did, this probably would have been my number 1 instead.
It really is a great match, because the reason why we say promise payoff is that technically you've fought Kratos many times before, but they're both fights that are open-ended, as in you can win or lose, it doesn't matter, and both times you've needed an entire party just to handle him, and it's always implied that, yeah, he's holding back.
Yeah. This duel is where Kratos finally lets fly at full strength one-on-one with Lloyd. And with the revelation that, hey, they're family, it's given a whole new level of emotional depth. And because I mentioned it last entry, may I just point out the music?
Oh, yeah. What was it called? A Moment of Thought or something?
The End of a Thought.
That's
or
it.
Tales of Symphonia's sort of digitized MIDI-fi attempt at a driving emotional metal instrumental. It is way better than it sounds. What really adds to the tone of the duel is the fact that it is, in fact, a remix of Kratos' leitmotif, which, to go back to a question we've touched upon, is my jam.
Indeed, yes. The atmosphere of it is really great, especially when we mentioned that it is one-on-one. The party aren't helping you in this, and it is Lloyd's choice to do that. That's how far he's grown.
Yeah, and after everything that's happened with Kratos, both the less than stellar stuff and the more sympathetic stuff, this is just as good a payoff as you could possibly hope for. Emotionally satisfying, fantastically epic, well scored. Really, to me, everything that happened after this point in Tales of Symphonia, it was good, but to me, Lloyd vs. Kratos was just the height of that game's atmosphere and emotional depth and payoff, and to use a term that I feel is a little weak for the situation, but it's the only thing I can think of, epicness. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's just the height of everything good about Tales of Symphonia. It's incredible, really.
Indeed. I mean, at the very least, it may not be the finale of the game, but it is at the very least the finale of Lloyd's growth, because after this is like the combination of everything he's learned fighting-wise, but it's also the combination of his character from ignorant, righteous brat to this calm, mature figure with emotional insight, to the point where he not only manages to stop Kratos from attempting to end his life afterward the duel, but also manages to convince what is essentially a demigod, hey, maybe help us, you know? I mean, it's obviously a big epic speech, which I'm not going to recite, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, essentially this duel was so cool it convinced God to help the party. Really, in no other duel can you say that of the aftermath of the proceedings, but it happened here, and it's satisfying on another level, because through a number of skits, Kratos was always presented as Lloyd's far superior in terms of swordsmanship, and this is where it finally turns around.
The student becomes the master, is the old cliche. But hey, sometimes the old cliches are the best.
Yeah, I mean, that exact cliche worked well in Star Wars, and it works well here as well. So at number 2, the height of Tales of Symphonia's excellence, Lloyd vs. Kratos. And yes, there's somehow one more duel above this. But before that, how about some honorable mentions?
Indeed. For my end, I have Lee vs. O'Hara from Enter the Dragon, Tan vs. Cold, or as some people might know it, Bruce Lee vs. Chuck Norris.
Of course.
One other fight that almost made it to the number 6 spot before being beaten out by the fight from Hero and Dope vs. Dead, Zuka vs. Azura from The Last Airbender.
Excellent choice.
There is also Deku vs. Todoroki from My Hero Academia, although there is also another duel that I really want to include for the manga, but that might spoil people who are watching the anime. Let me just say you've got a lot to look forward to. But anyway.
Fair enough.
And my last honorable mention, another Star Wars entry, Luke vs. Kylo Ren.
Excellent. Very good, my friend. Very good. On my end, I don't have quite as many, but I like to think that they're quality enough to stand up with the rest. First I have, because we have to complete the Avatar cycle, Korra vs. Kuvira from Legend of Korra. I also have Ellen vs. Herod from The Quick and the Dead, because I live in the Old West. And from Critical Role, of all places, I have the rematch between Grog and Kern. I should not be surprised this is a thing, because Travis is a wrestling fan. And as I recall, Grog ended that fight with a Northern Light suplex like Jason Jordan. Let me tell you, Grog did it better.
Aw.
Sorry, Jason Jordan.
Oh, and I know it's wrestling, so it's iffy, but I also want to include Killshot vs. Dante Fox in the Hell of War match from Lucha Underground. You go and listen to Frit the Mic, and I think it's the first episode, actually, if you want to know why.
And since you went ahead with it, I will also include The Undertaker vs. Shawn Michaels 2 from WrestleMania 26. Again, it's iffy because it's wrestling, but they actually played this up like Shawn Michaels' last duel, so there you go.
Indeed. And now, it comes down to this. Our number 1 duels going, I guess, head-to-head?
The Duel of Duels.
Would certainly be thematic, yes. Now, my first is, okay, it's not going to surprise anyone that it's a martial arts.
Of course not, but it's part of your charm.
It's from one of the most famous ones, which I wasn't originally going to include on the list, but then I watched it and kicked myself for even thinking it shouldn't be on this list. My personal number 1 duel in fiction goes to Jen vs. Shu Lien from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Because, of course, I know about this one because we totally didn't base a scene in something we're writing on this very duel.
Indeed, that's something to look forward to much later. But yeah, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, it's already a great martial arts film, but one of the things I love about it is that it's a film that it seems like I spot a new subtle detail with every rewatch. Like, the director Ang Lee pitched it to Michelle Yeoh as Sense and Sensibility, but with swords. And that's actually a pretty good summary of what Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is.
Huh, that's Honestly, an amazing summary.
Yeah, because it's not just a kung fu movie. I mean, yes, one of the big plot points is that a thief who turns out to be Jen nicks a legendary sword known as Green Destiny, which is like meant to be one of the strongest swords ever, and goes on a rampage a bit. But there is a lot of subtle character work going on here. There are a lot of subtle themes, and they all come to a head for this big duel, which isn't quite the finale, but kind of like Lloyd vs. Kratos, it certainly feels like the finale. To try and give a quick summary of what's happened here, like I said, Jen, who is the teenage daughter of a nobleman, has stolen Green Destiny and is going on a rampage. Essentially, she's been rebellious and running from home because there is a lot about her life she doesn't like. She wants freedom and the ability to make her own choices, but she's a noblewoman in ancient China.
Yeah, sort of a rough lot there for someone who wants freedom.
But at the same time, she's still a teenager, so not only is there the dangerous aspect of the fact that she doesn't really quite know what she wants. Like, she knows, I just want to be free, man, but she hasn't actually given any thought to what that means, or how am I going to live once I'm free. And on top of that, she's also kind of lashing out at anyone who comes near her. Xu Lian, played by the great Michelle Yeoh, has been very patient considering, because at the start the two of them, they called each other sisters, but it was really more Xu Lian treated her kindly, partially because she wants the young girl to do well, and partially because, well, she's a mercenary, she was kind of hired to protect the place, so of course she's going to be nice to the client's daughter, but,
As you do.
And it also comes that Jen idolizes her because, wow, Xu Lian, partner of the legendary Li Bai, who I should mention was also the original wielder of the Green Destiny, I'd be honored to have you like a sister and all of that. Unfortunately, Xu Lian's kindness has been met with nothing but spite from Jen, who nicks the sword, doesn't give it back despite Xu Lian desperately trying to explain what repercussions could be, and shortly before this duel, after she's got on her rampage, Jen comes back after realizing that being on the run is hard. So she comes back, has a cry, and the two of them just sort of talk through feelings, but Xu Lian then says, okay, I've arranged with Li Bai, he can get you into his old temple Wu Dan, and then maybe you can go with them and train and reflect all your abilities. And Jen then gets up seen as, oh, I get it, so I trusted you, and then you're trying to jail me, and then goes to run off, at which point, Xu Lian just snaps, going, okay, you listen here, you brat. We have been nothing but kind to you, and you've continuously thrown it in our faces. You don't deserve to have that sword. Give it back, or I'm going to arrest you.
You know, again, as you do, because after everything that's gone down, what else is there to do?
I'm really simplifying this, to be honest, because there also is a lot of subtle detail, but regardless, there are so many things I like about this battle. Like I said, it's a combination of the tension that's been building between the characters for a while, but there is also, again, a lot of subtle details. Like, the choreography is fantastic, and even more amazing when you consider that Ziyi Yang, I think that's how you pronounce it, who played Jen, she isn't actually a fighter, she's a dancer. The two of them had to work on this from the ground up, and it's really awesome because you would never know from seeing these two in action, my god.
You know, I'm always impressed by stuff like that because, man, talk about crossing over of trades.
But on top of the amazing choreography and camera work, because again, it has all that stuff I prefer in action movies where the camera is steady, you can see all the movements, and there's none of that BS shaky cam or slow-mo. But there is also a lot of subtle stuff going on here, because at first it seems from the outside that Jen seems to be getting the upper hand. There's a lot of subtle hints in both the performance and the way Xu Lian uses the fighting styles, because essentially the way this fight's playing out is that Jen does have some natural talent for fighting, but she thinks that she's the greatest fighter ever. There's this element of smugness that she has, especially at the beginning, but that slowly doesn't dissipate because she assumes that it's all her amazing skill that's got her this far, forgetting that she has Green Destiny, which is essentially like playing a fighting game but with cheat codes on. Meanwhile, you're fighting against Xu Lian, who again is a mercenary, someone who has been fighting for years and knows how all these different weapons work. As such, whilst it is true that Jen keeps continuously breaking whatever weapon Xu Lian uses, you see that aside from one moment when she tries to pick up what is, I forget the exact name for it, but it's essentially a gigantic battle axe, which she then picks up out of desperation but finds she can't lift. Aside from that, Shu Lien is pretty much in control and calculating the entire time. Like, she is continuously getting the best weapons, and she keeps almost getting Jen. It's only thanks to a few lucky power blows that she's able to break any of the weapons at all. This becomes more prominent when she eventually picks up what is known as a Xian. Best way I can describe it for Western audiences is a baseball bat made out of metal. That's the best way I can describe this. And it's a weapon that Jen can't cut easily, and like I said, it's all credit to the actors here for selling all of these little details. Like, Ji Yan, every time the sword hits it, but she acts like every vibration is shaking her to her core. Every time it strikes, she is very barely managing to hold on to the sword, never mind maintaining her balance. And as this keeps going on, the arena gets destroyed, weapons are left lying around the ground, and they're all still there during the fight. There's no quick, easy edits like, oh, let's go into this room where we don't have to worry about continuity. No, everything's all still there. You can still see all the details. And again, this is all amazing counterwork, and unlike the others, because the Fight for Thunderbolt Fantasy, great counterwork, a lot of it is through dialogue. This is purely visual. Like, again, you can see just the difference between skill and ability used here. And ultimately, despite everything, Shu Lien does officially win the duel, in the sense that what is actually one of the coolest moments, the two of them end up fighting with long swords. Jen breaks Shu Lien's swords, but Shu Lien just steps in and then places the broken sword right up to her neck.
And may I just add, that's awesome.
The only reason Jen manages to get away is that at this point, Shu Lien pretty much expects her to surrender at this point, but again, spiteful teenager, so she stabs her in the arm.
Wow. As I believe I mentioned in your last entry, dick move.
Yeah, basically. So, it's short and simple, but for the choreography and all of the build-up to this, and again, the real subtle character work that goes on throughout, that's why I freaking love this duel, and why it's gonna take a lot to beat this. So, yeah, number one, Jen versus Shu Lien. This movie is known as a classic for a reason, guys, even by non-martial art fans.
Yeah, I mean, when a film is legendary, there's usually a reason for it.
Mm-hmm. That's my list complete. Sven, the finale is yours.
Now, honestly, I know that whenever I say it, my number one entry will come as a surprise to absolutely no one. I've mentioned it before. I've mentioned other aspects of this duel before. But even though it's just about the most predictable thing ever coming from me, it still belongs here. Nothing has beaten it yet, and I'm not sure if anything will beat it in the years following, in my estimation. From a film that I think deserves much more love than it ultimately received in the end. Number one, from Sword of the Stranger, Nanashi vs. Luolong, the final battle.
Ah, yes. I will mention the only reason it's not on my list is because I knew it would be on Sven, so we like to avoid clashes.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably both go on at length about this duel, but we have to keep things organized, so here I am taking the lead on this. For just a quick summary, Sword of the Stranger, it's a fairly straightforward movie. A nameless mercenary who ends up going by the moniker Nanashi, meaning nameless in Japanese, ends up tasking himself with the protection of a 10-year-old boy who has fanatical soldiers after him who want to use him as a human sacrifice for immortality. Because ancient China. And through the course of the movie, there are several climactic, epic confrontations between Nanashi and the soldiers in question, including a group of mercenaries led by a monstrous, bloodthirsty battle seeker named Luolong, a European mercenary who is virtually without peer. This all culminates in a sequence where, once and for all, Nanashi, who in his past it was implied that on the orders of the Japanese shogunate he was responsible for the murder of children, unsheathes his sword, strikes down the mercenary crew in the name of the child he's defending, and comes face to face with Luolong in the midst of a screaming blizzard. And thus do we get, perhaps, the most visually stunning anime sequence I have ever watched.
Oh yeah, this is just, the animation is so great here. Like, it's a fight that doesn't even have, I guess for lack of a better word, the tropes of what you would expect from an anime fight. Because it's a movie and it's higher budget, there's no cutting corners, there's no freeze frames, there's no static shots of people screaming, no one's yelling attack names. It's just a straight up sword fight between two people that is moving very fast and very frantic.
Yeah, like, it's just two sword masters going head to head, blade to blade, and style to style, because it's really another demonstration on point here is the contrast between Chinese swordsmanship and Luolong, who is wielding, I believe it is a Chinese Jian, and Nanashi, who is a Ronin wielding a katana, and just the exchange of styles and the pace of the action is just frankly insane. It's straightforward, but combined with the setting, the atmosphere, the emotional payoff that's been building for literally the entire movie, it's just such a spectacle. And I believe I've mentioned before the soundtrack.
Oh yes, Ichi no Yaiba, was it?
Ihojin no Yaiba, The Blade of Hope. Just fantastic musical scoring by, I'm sorry man, I'm about to butcher your name, Naoki Sato. Man, if ever he had a magnum opus, it is this song in this scene, just underscoring such an incredible payoff to an incredible movie.
Oh yeah, indeed, because it's not like the music is sort of big and bombastic, it's this sort of slow, emotional moment, because at this point, Nanashi has already been in several grueling fights, and Luolong, he's kind of a guy who is very dangerous, but he's almost very willing to die, because there's one very key point. All of the other guys Nanashi has faced, you mentioned before the fanatic group is seeking immortality, they already have pills which dull any form of pain. So there is actually one literal point in the film where Luolong cuts one of these guys' arms off, and their only reaction is, dude, why'd you cut my arms off? What the heck?
Yeah, in fact, it's the lead up to this fight, and sort of the underscoring moment of Luolong's character. He flat out murders his own employer because all he wants in life is to find someone who can match him in skill. And he will be damned if he lets anyone take that from him. Money aside, loyalty aside, that is all he wants. And in Nanashi, he finally finds it.
Indeed. I mentioned previously some of the coolest duels are ones where both parties respect each other. This happens at the start because Luolong speaks in, depending on which version you're watching, broken Japanese or broken English, saying, take this pill, pain goes away. Nanashi replies, I like the pain, it makes me feel alive. And this earns Luolong's respect.
Yeah, in fact, I believe the exact line made all the cooler in the English dub by the presence of Scott McNeil, Eternal Badass. He replies, good, I like you more and more. And thus the duel kicks off between two virtual equals, masters of the blade, who respect each other, and who have come to the ends of their respective stories. It's all on the line, everything to lose, stakes as high as they can be. And after the build-up in the film, the mystique of Luolong as this unbeatable badass, it's just, oh, it's so good.
Oh, yeah, and just like the very nature of the fight, it's choreographed, like how brutal it gets and how they're running all over the different locations. The blizzard also plays a factor into it.
Yeah, and just the intensity, the length they're willing to go to best one another. You really get the sense that you're watching the culmination and finest endpoint of swordplay. It's the best kind of knockdown, drag-out, brutal artwork, basically. It's just the animation, the scoring, the story, the character work. It, again, almost nothing has to be said in this scene for you to get the emotional impact of it.
In fact, I don't think much is said after that conversation I mentioned.
Yeah, it's just at the beginning and at the very end, which I won't spoil because I need people in the audience to have a reason to watch this movie. Hint, watch this movie. Just at the beginning and the end, that's all the dialogue there is in the entire sequence, and it's all the dialogue the scene needs. It's just incredible.
Oh god, yes. This is just... It is such an excellent duel.
Yeah, it's funny, this duel came to me whenever I was just starting to get really tired of Naruto and Bleach and the repetitive nature of fight after fight after fight, and they were all the same. I watched this and my mind was blown.
I think that really is the mark of a great duel, especially a character one, because sometimes, yeah, it can be a little bit repetitive and cheesy, but when you get that one that's just right, when a fight stands out and it also acts as an evolution of the characters, then, my god, those moments can really make a story, be it a series, be it a film, be it anime, be it live action.
Yeah, and this duel legitimately makes the entire film, because it's a great movie up to this point. Well written, well thought out. It's not a super huge epic story. It's very personal and character driven, and it's very contained, and this duel just signs off everything. It ties it all together and turns a good film into a masterpiece. And that, I think, is the summary of what you just said. A good final confrontation and a satisfying end to the conflict can be what makes or breaks an entire movie, an entire show, an entire series. And that's on perfect display here, where it absolutely makes it.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think I've glurged enough. Boiling it all down, this entire movie and its conclusion are phenomenal, and I would recommend it to almost anybody.
Likewise. And, yeah, the dust has settled, the duels have died down. Some people are alive, others are probably dead. Like I said at the start, if there are any duels we've missed, feel free to talk about them in the comments section. If anything else, it will give us an excuse to go out and search for more epic fights. But in this case, after the dust has settled, only one remains. And that is...
Quickfire Reviews!
This is the section where we review everything else we've read, watched, or played, but within a maximum time limit of 60 seconds. Sven, do you have anything?
Real quick, I'll mention one game that's been occupying me for the last month or so.
Realm Grinder on Congregate.com. Think of it as Cookie Clicker without the eldritch horrors, and instead of clicking cookies, you are instead building a kingdom. I don't know what makes this game so addicting to me, but I've been playing it for a month, and my mindset while going through all of this has basically just been, get more upgrades! Must get more upgrades!
Yeah, that sounds about right. In fact, it's a mindset I've been having with a certain DLC pack I've been playing recently.
Fire Emblem Warriors DLC Wave 3. This is all the stuff based on Awakening, so we get the characters of Tarja, Owain, and Olivia. Whilst I feel that one of the new voices was slightly miscast, everything else about the DLC has been enjoyable. There's new missions which are nice challenges, but there's yet more upgrades you can get for the character, including the skill Gale Force, which I've already given to Lynn and have made her quite possibly the most broken unit I have. I mean, there's nothing here that's going to change your mind if you weren't a fan of Fire Emblem Warriors, and I know many people weren't, but if, like me, you were in it just for cheap, easy over-the-top battles and support conversations, and yeah, there are some, and they're pretty good, then, yeah, fun all round.
I still need to look into that, but money and game consoles. Also,
yeah.
I like how, by way of skills, you have basically turned Lynn into Luolong.
Yeah, and with that closes the quickfire review section, and once again, thanks to everyone for listening, and as always, send us any questions or comments, any comments that are respectable to other people, but...
Yeah, try not to be a WWE fan.
Oh god. But yeah, as long as you're respectful, we're willing to listen to anything you have to say, and especially if you have questions. Like we mentioned, we really need those. We're terrified of not having questions, but
your questions are the fuel that burns in the soul of this show. I'm not joking.
And on that existential crisis, we end this month's podcast. Until next time, I've been the Jonin Monkey.
And I've been Sven the Crusader. Try not to duel too hard, folks.
Duels Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review and discussion show hosted by the Jonin Monkey and Sven the Crusader. If you feel that you've been the subject of slander or that your copyright has been misused, please PM me and I'll try and get round to fixing it as soon as possible. We also welcome any comments, be it feedback or your own viewpoints on any of the things we've discussed. Until next month, have fun kids!